Every once in a while, I will find an article or a report in the news, and when I read it, I think to myself, I sure hope everybody else is reading this. I know that's not the case, and that's why on occasion what I will do is I will come to this microphone and I will literally share the article. I'd like to do that today. This article got my attention. I have read it. I have reread it. I continue to wonder about its credibility. It is published by the WashingtonTimes.com. It was on an internet site. I assume it was their site. The title of the article is, and it was published April 16, 2008, Nuclear Attack on D.C., District of Columbia, a Hypothetical Disaster. The article is written by Gary Emmerling, and here's how it reads. A nuclear device detonated near the White House would kill roughly 100,000 people and flatten downtown federal buildings, while the radioactive plume from the explosion would likely spread toward the Capitol and into southwest D.C., contaminating thousands more. The blast from the 10-kiloton bomb, similar to the bomb dropped over Hiroshima during World War II, would kill up to 1 in 10 tourists visiting the Washington Monument and send shards of glass flying the length of the National Mall. In a scenario that has become increasingly likely to occur, let me repeat that. This is the article I'm reading from. In a scenario that has become increasingly likely to occur in a major U.S. city in recent years, panel members told a Senate committee yesterday. Now, this is a report to a Senate committee. Now, let me quote a member of the reporting committee. Quote, "It's inevitable," end quote, said Chaim E. Dallas, director of the Institute for Health Management and Mass Destruction Defense at the University of Georgia, who has charted the potential explosion's effect in the district and testified before a hearing of the Senate Committee on Homeland Security and Governmental Affairs. Quote continues, "I think it is wistful to think it won't happen by 20 years, end quote. In other words, a nuclear 10-kiloton bomb leveling a good portion of a major city in the United States, and that could potentially be Washington, D.C. Now, I realize those of us that teach Bible prophecy are a lot of times we're pointed to and we're said to be alarmist. That's why I'm reading an article that comes from a secular publication, and I believe we need to wake up. We need to wake up to the reality of our day. The article goes on. The Senate committee has convened a series of hearings to examine the threat and effects of a terrorist nuclear attack on a U.S. city, as well as the needed response. Yesterday's panel stressed the importance of state and local cooperation with federal authorities in the wake of an attack, assistance from the private business sector to aid recovery, and the dire need to boost the capabilities of area hospitals. They recommended expanding emergency personnel by training physicians like pharmacists and dentists to aid in all hazards care, monitoring the exposure of first responders to radiation, and clearly disseminating information to the public. And then it goes on. Let me again now, I'm going to quote, in this case, the quote is from Senator Joe Lieberman. Quote, "The scenarios we discussed today are very hard for us to contemplate." He's right on that, isn't he? "And so emotionally traumatic and unsettling that it is tempting to push them aside," said Senator Joe Lieberman. I like Senator Lieberman. I really do. I have for a long time. And you know what? He is speaking the truth here. We don't want to go here, do we? We don't want to think about this. Senator Lieberman went on, "However, now is the time to have this difficult conversation, to ask the tough questions and then to get answers as best we can and take preparatory and preventive action." Folks, do you hear that? That's Senator Joe Lieberman. I mean, we're not talking about some crazy Bible guy. We're talking about a man who has a great knowledge of what's going on in our world, an accomplished, mature man. It goes on, by the way. Let me read a little bit more. I hope you don't mind me doing this, but when I read this, it got my attention. It was kind of a wake-up to me, a wake-up call. Aston B. Carter, co-director of the Preventive Defense Project at Harvard University, said the likelihood of a nuclear attack on U.S. soil is undetermined, but it has increased with the proliferation of weapons by Iran and North Korea and the failure to secure Russia's nuclear arsenal following the Cold War. Did you hear that? I mean, it's obvious. We can't put, a prediction on this. We can't give some kind of statistic. We can't, say probabilities. But this man goes on, Aston B. Carter. He says, for while the probability of a nuclear weapon one day going off in the United States cannot be calculated, it is almost surely larger than it was 5 years ago, Mr. Carter said. Mr. Carter, can I throw something in? This is John Nieder. It's going to be that much worse 5 years from now. Friends, the world is getting more and more dangerous. If Israel hadn't taken out a possible nuclear capability in Syria, where would we be today? If Muammar Gaddafi hadn't surrendered his program and we went into Iraq, where would we be today? And, of course, now he's speaking with Russia, and he could possibly find himself with that capability before too long. And Mr. Carter went on. He described the more destructive blast effect. He said the ground-based detonation of a 10-kiloton bomb would result in near total devastation within a circle about 2 miles in diameter, or the length of the Washington Mall. The zone of destruction is projected to be less than in Hiroshima, where the bomb was dropped from an airplane and detonated above the city. And by the way, when they're talking about these size bombs, I think what they're doing is thinking this is something that, this level, they could be a lot stronger than this, but if it's done by a terrorist organization, then more than likely it would be a smaller bomb. But still, listen to the devastation here. Coming back to Mr. Dallas, he said a major problem facing most cities is a lack of available hospital beds for victims of burns that would result from a nuclear blast. He said up to 95% of such victims would not receive potentially life-saving care. Here, listen to this quote. We're completely underprepared, he said. Most of them would die. Now, friends, there's a little bit more I want to share, maybe another sentence or two, another quote or two, but let me just quickly say this. In the Bible, it does not indicate that when Jesus Christ returns, he returns to a world that's been devastated by a nuclear holocaust. Now, it's possible that nuclear weapons could factor in and that God is going to allow those weapons in the hands of man to ultimately be under God's control and that he will have us judging one another. It is possible. I think you can defend that position. Most believe that God's judgments are direct. It's not going to involve a nuclear capability. But the bottom line is, in terms of any kind of time frame, when you look at the world that we're in, when you see the dangers that are there, that are growing on a daily basis, literally, you've got to ask yourself how much time is left before God's plan to bring judgments to this world will be set into motion. Mr. Dallas said the majority of victims in a nuclear explosion will likely have to fend for themselves in the first hours after an attack. Then he says this, quote, these people are going to be on their own, he said. There's no white horse to ride to the rescue. And as I read those words, I thought of what we read in Revelation chapter 6, where we are told, I watched as the Lamb opened the first of the 7 seals. Then I heard one of the 4 living creatures say in a voice like thunder, come. I looked, and there before me was a white horse. Its rider held a bow, and he was given a crown. And he rode out as a conqueror bent on conquest. There is only one hope for our world, and that is the return of Jesus Christ.